Welcome everyone. My name is Phillip Harris, and this is my studio, part of my studio here. And I do live in the Hudson Valley, New York. It's kind of near the Catskill Mountains, mid-Hudson Valley. Also, I'd like to introduce my co-host. I have a lovely friend here, Kelly McKee, who is kind of running the technical part of all this. Hopefully she'll make it all work. So I want to tell you a little bit about my history and how I got involved with painting and so forth. But before I begin, though, I want to just thank Steve, Oliver, and the whole staff at Rittenhouse Square. It's a real honor to be a part of this event. Those guys have done a great job, and this is new for a lot of us, so we're all learning a lot of things. Rittenhouse, I do want to say that the Rittenhouse show last year was my first year there, and I just really loved it. I loved being there. I loved the people I met, and I got a really good response to the work. And it's just, I've been doing shows for over 30 years, so I mean, you can tell when you're in a show when they're doing things right, and I could pretty much tell that immediately. I also want to say that this is my livelihood. I've been doing shows. I do shows all over the country. This year has been a very odd year, as we all know. Personally, I've had 11 shows canceled because of COVID. And Rittenhouse is the only show that took the initiative to do a virtual show after they had to cancel the actual show. And it doesn't surprise me that these guys have voted the best show in the country. With that kind of effort, they should be, and I just want to thank them for that. I want to start. We're gonna look at some of the work. I've been working with the landscape for several years now, about 7 or 8 years. And I'm going to show you some pieces that have kind of led me to the place where I'm at right now. For me, the creative process is a journey. It's how ideas lead to other ideas and to other ideas. It's not a stagnant kind of thing. It's not like you find something that works and you just continue it. I don't think that way. I mean, I am always stimulated by growth and new paths and that sort of thing. So let's get started, Kelly. Let's look at a painting. It's called Coastal Pier. Coastal Pier is, I grew up in North Carolina near the coast, and so I go there all the time. And with this painting, I just want to kind of talk about how I get ideas. Sometimes ideas just kind of get me. Ideas like this one, I was visiting the coast a few years back. It was in March. It was weird. It was a total fog bank that had set in. So I was there for several days, and I couldn't see anything. Couldn't see, 2 feet in front of you hardly. So one day I was walking on the beach, and not quite sure where I was, and all of a sudden, that fog started to lift finally. And what happened within a half an hour was just amazing. What happened was the fog broke, the sun started to come out, and it was behind this pier. The pier was between myself and the sun. So this beautiful old wooden structure, this pier, started to emerge out of the darkness, and it was sort of a transitional thing. The light started, reflecting across all the cast shadows, and it was a magical moment. It was just truly magical, and I knew at that point this had to be a painting. So sometimes ideas find me, and I think it's for myself, it's just really important to see, to be aware when they happen, and understand that that's. That needs to be a painting. So and there's another painting that came out of this series. It's called Coastal Pier 2. Um, this painting was shortly after that, after the sky glowed and opened, and you could see distances. This painting here is part of this subject, but now it has a lesser role. It's right on the horizon. So this painting is really not about the pier, but it's what happens afterwards. It's about this, this vast space. And I wanted to show this painting because this painting kind of describes a process of how I design paintings. The sky in this image, actually, that was not the sky that was there. That sky was from another place and another time. So what I do with large paintings like this is I assemble imagery from various, they're kind of like collage. I collage these images together. And I knew I wanted that dramatic sky to go along with that, that dramatic surf. Just call it artistic license, but that's kind of how I design paintings. And in this particular painting, at the end, I found I wanted to put that figure in there because that kind of gave it this symbolic, this place where you go to contemplate. We all go to the coast and do that. So anyway, these paintings were more about, in terms of the process, they're more about rendering texture and rendering surfaces, and creating the illusion of surfaces. Okay.
Kristen Farrell says collage of elements. That's interesting.
She says what?
Collage of elements. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're come. What was her name?
Kristen Farrell.
Kristen. Kristen. Yes, it's not like a paper collage thing, but I bring imagery from various sources in all my paintings. In all my paintings, none of these places actually exist the way you see them in the painting. The paintings are an assemblage of imagery from different places to kind of try to create a kind of statement that I'm trying to make with the paintings. So let me talk about that a little further. But Kelly, let's go. It's a good question, by the way. Good comment. Let's go to the river edge south. The next few paintings that I want to show are they deal with the Hudson River theme, and like the last paintings, I always work in a series. I always work in a kind of continuation of the theme. So the next few paintings will kind of be focused on the Hudson River. These are kind of near where I live. This particular painting, again, there's not, this actual place does not exist. So like the tree imagery on the right and the coast, the edge of the water, those are from different places. And that background, that really isn't there either. So they all have a purpose. And in this painting, it's a kind of a historical place in that view in the background is the Roosevelt Presidential Home and Garden. It's kind of a landmark on the Hudson River. So I wanted to put that in there. If you're familiar with the river, people, they kind of know that. But this painting and the next painting, let's go to the next painting too, Cal. It's this is called River Edge North. These two paintings are sort of the same vantage. One is obviously looking south, one is looking north. These paintings, what I was really one of my driving interests with this painting is I really, instead of looking at a Hudson River painting as like, this romantic, distant kind of place, I wanted to get like right down and look at the sort of the raw forces that happen on the river's edge, where you have these opposing things coming together, the tidal stuff, the way the river carves out the edge, as well as the distant view kind of at a more broad, deeper space. But I was really interested in it kind of like, what really happens on the edge. I just found it really visually, and symbolic, it was very rich. So this particular painting, I also wanted to talk about this because this painting marked a change for me. Some things started to happen in this painting. Like I said earlier, ideas within paintings start to happen. And I think it's very important as a painter and an artist and a creative person to be kind of aware of these accidental things. And the part of this painting I'm talking about is the texture of the paint. This is one of the first paintings I really started to push the layering of paint instead of everything rendered with a brush and really flat. This I started to use palette knives and big spatula knives and things, and started to really build up an actual textured surface. And I just it was sort of a breakthrough for me, and I felt like, it just added this spirit of what the landscape was about. A landscape like that is such a textural place, and so this painting, I don't know how well you can see it with this image, but all the white area of the snowbank there is just really thick and pasto. And let's look at this idea, because other paintings I was doing at the same time. The next little painting is a little study, a bird study. It's called Survival Study. This painting is the same thing. It was when I first made the painting, and now when I work on paintings, like you could see where in my studio, I do a lot of different things at once. So this smaller painting I was doing at the same time I did that last painting with the thick paint. In this painting, I built the imagery, the birds. I was really taking what they were, the dynamic that was playing out. This was right outside my studio. I feed birds, and this the storm during this winter storm, and they were just really, really aggressive to each other, fighting for this bird food, and it was just really, it was a very, interesting dynamic to see play out in these birds. But in terms of the paint and how it's painted, the palette knife, the big knives and spatulas I was using on the previous painting, I had made this painting and I knew it just kind of lacked it lacked something. So in the very end, I brought that sensibility of applying this thick paint, which is in the streaks of snow and the accumulation of snow on the bird feeder and so forth. So contrasting that with the muted background and the kind of blurry gray, color and light of the painting, the painting just came alive. It just came alive when this texture was in it. And again, this is like how my ideas evolve. I experienced something with a sense of play and trying to have a sense of just discovery within the process, within the actual process, and little accidental things that happen, to try to kind of remember them and seeing the potential of them. To me, that's really the creative process. That's it's right there, because that kind of leads you to, or leads me to discovery. So all right, so now here's two paintings. One idea is kind of we've gone to the next painting. So let's look at a couple other paintings with some other ideas. The next one is called River at Dawn. And this painting, again, is from that same series, that Hudson River series, working with a similar theme. But this painting, I mean, it really isn't, you don't really identify it as a Hudson River. This could be anywhere. This could be the Delaware. This could be any river. But what I was interested here in, and I did a bunch of work based on this idea, was that I really was interested in what happens right at daylight, right when, the night, switches into day, that point when the sun pops through and, a new day begins, So I did a lot of work based on that particular idea. And it kind of culminated with this large painting. When I do, when I have an idea like that and I pursue it, I'll do smaller paintings, I'll do studies, I'll do medium-sized paintings, keep continuing to push that idea. And they usually always culminate in one of these large paintings. This painting, I think it's about 4 by 5 feet. So this painting is really about light, and and the play of light across the landscape, and the real spirit of that awakening kind of thing. So it's really not that much about texture. There's a little texture starting to happen here, but not like on the other. But let's go. I'm going to go to another painting that's kind of was done at this time. It's called Sophus Meadows. Can you find that, Charlie? This is something, and all these landscapes. I just want to talk about one thing about the landscape and why I chose the landscapes, work with landscapes in the first place. Is landscapes to me, they are really essential for my well-being. Like I really deeply feel that, and I've had this experience when I've had tragedy in my life, loss in my life, at that point, I find myself, seeking to go out and take a hike, go somewhere special out in nature. For me, nature has that ability to heal ourselves, and I think, in these times that we live in, with climate issues and development and so forth, that our landscapes are threatened. And that's one of the real driving forces behind me making landscapes, is, I think we need a record of this. We need to be reminded of what's out there. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do in a broader sense with my work. This particular place, the Sophus Meadows, not only is it a really rich and beautiful place visually, but environmentally, it's a very necessary place. Those meadows, it's actually shallow water for several hundred yards. It goes out to the river, and so in the spring and summer, these water chestnuts grow. And I found that I've learned that this is a habitat for major species of fish coming out of the Atlantic, and they come up in the Hudson River, kind of like the shad come up the Delaware. Shad come up the Hudson, striped bass do. This is a critical habitat for them. So this painting, is really a sort of a statement for myself to honor that place. And I just love what happens, with the biology that happens in the river, and how it's connected to larger things like ocean fish. This is a delicate time on it. So that's kind of a driving force behind why I do these landscapes. And so let's go to some more current work. These paintings have been done in the last few years, but like in the last year, what I'm working on now. Kelly, can you bring up Winter Fall? Winter Fall is, in these next few paintings, like the Hudson River series, they're done, they're all centered around an area that I found that I just fell in love with. In this, just a tributary of the Hudson. It's a place called Black Creek. And Black Creek is, it's interesting because it's a real dramatic landscape that this creek has carved out these big caverns, and there's a series of waterfalls, and it's just a geographically very interesting place. But this painting, which was done in the winter and spring, this painting is very important for me in terms of continuing to understand and use that texture of the paint. And this painting, more than the earlier the earlier painting of the river's edge, this painting is filled with, a much greater texture. And so just keep pushing an idea, seeing how much, the possibilities within an idea. This painting was also kind of a breakthrough for me because not only am I pushing the texture of the paint in this painting, but also the right side of the painting, which is predominantly the water. This water, the translucency of water, and seeing down into the water and seeing the vegetation and stuff below the water is a big part of this painting. So now in this painting, unlike the other ones, so now the paint is sort of being pushed in two separate directions. One toward the heavy impasto and one toward the translucency, and kind of joining those two together. The contrast I see, and I found out that it just makes for this real, this beautiful richness of diverse sort of contrasted surface. And that continues into the next painting from this theme. The next painting, which is Winterfell 2. It's a similar area there. Again, using those ideas of, collaging or bringing in subjects from other places and assembling them into this sort of made up place. That's part of this painting too. That place doesn't really exist like that, but artistic license. But this painting pushes that idea that happened in the previous painting of really thick paint versus very transparent paint. Looking into a surface and the surface, extending out beyond the picture color, and it's just a process and a way I've been working, and it's for me, like if I make paintings and they all kind of look the same, I think I would be bored with that. So for myself, I have to keep changing them to keep, challenging myself and to keep inspired by what I'm doing and seeing. So that's these from the same series. Let's look at another painting. It's called Black Creek number 3. This painting is, again, in that similar area. And here you can see the real dramatic landscape, the real, that big, large diagonal of that cliff on the right side. But this was kind of a breakthrough painting for me also. Like the earlier paintings, I was using some of those ideas of thick paint, of translucent paint, of water and snow and rock and ice and these things. But this paint, when you look at it closely, it's starting to become more abstract. It's really drifting away from the literal rendering of imagery. And now this painting, it's the surface and the kind of character of the marks and the dynamic quality of the marks. You can kind of get lost in this painting, and the process was that way too. Instead of just a more controlled, sort of deliberate application of paint, here it was more of a kind of a gestural application of paint, and sort of playing with the, just the surface, within the format of this stream and this cliff and these trees and so forth. And at the very last part of this painting, there's this white flickering motif that goes across the surface that really kind of gave it this real wintry, sort of snow-filled kind of sense. And again, that's just edges of the palette knife, just kind of randomly, quickly marking the surface. So this painting has a real abstract dynamic and quality about it. And I think it's the direction paintings in the near future will go. They'll sort of, I think they're going to be going further toward abstraction and less toward literal kind of imagery. But I still want to keep that imagery. I don't want to completely abandon representation. So the next two paintings. Let's look at the next painting, Kelly. It's Black Creek #5. Again, same area, same theme, working a continuation of the theme. But this painting, Black Creek #5, it's pushing these ideas further. The texture of the paint, the process of how it's painted, the transparency versus opaque quality of the paint. In fact, Kelly, let's go to the next slide. The next slide is a detail of Black Creek #5. And you can see in this detail, all the layering of paint. This is a detail of the water, kind of like the little turbulent area of the water. And, it's just, it really has that, in my opinion, that feel of water, that spirit of water, without it, being this, and that's all done in a real random kind of aggressive gestural kind of way, just scraping and pulling and just, I kind of think of it as like how a jazz musician plays an instrument. They just kind of get lost in that kind of, that energy of notes and rhythms and so forth. And it's the same thing, I think, with this for me. Like, when I'm working with areas like that, at some point I'm just like, it's kind of like this dance, this energy of moving and scraping and marking and rubbing and just playing with the surface itself. At that point, I don't care about that image. I don't care about the landscape. I just care about what I'm experiencing in the process. And that to me, that's very exciting part of painting. There's so much. I do design paintings. I bring in imagery from lots of different sources. So there's a real structure to this stuff. But then at one point, during the process, I kind of try to have sort of a reckless abandon sort of thing, because to me that's brings an energy that I just can't get any other way. And again, I'll just compare it to a good friend of mine's a jazz saxophonist, and when he plays, sometimes he just gets lost, kind of like a John Coltrane sort of approach, and that's what I'm trying to do. Let's look at the last painting from this series. This painting is called Fallen Tree. So this painting is kind of like that Esopus Meadows painting. Like my ideas, they drift all over the place. And this painting, it follows the ideas of process and texture and application and subject matter that I've been working with. But something else happened for me personally at this time, and what happened is I lost a very dear friend. This person in my life was a real giant of a person that was a real blessing to have that person in my life for a long time. So to me, this notion of fallen tree is a very personal statement about this person that I loved that was gone now. His time, was up, and like anything, we're all, everything in my mind is temporary. Our relationships, our life, seasons. I mean, it's all. I think the Hindus say the only thing that's permanent is change. And so this painting is sort of like a tribute to my friend. I love this tree. These forests in the Hudson Valley are just filled with spectacular trees. And this image, this tree having fallen, now it's entering another phase of, in a real critical phase. What happens as this tree, breaks down, elements in this tree, go back into the environment, So this tree is a tribute to a friend of mine that I lost. So ideas can come from lots of places. I just want to emphasize, and the paintings that I've shared here, I just kind of want to give an example of that. And I don't know where my paintings are going to go. I have an idea short term where they're going to go, but a year from now, I don't know. I'll just take that journey. I'll keep going, and we'll get to that. But Kelly, let's bring the imagery back into the studio here. One thing I wanted to show, if we could zoom in on this a little bit, is when I've had a break from painting, when I come back into the studio, I really start with simple things. I have tons. I make these little small panels, and I kind of. I have tons of them in these crates that I make. They're all the same size, and these are hard panels that are gessoed, have a bit of texture on them. So with these paintings, I can scrape on them. I can cut into them, unlike a stretch canvas. So when I had a break in painting and I come back, it's pretty intimidating. It's like, geez, it's like the blank canvas syndrome, the empty page syndrome. Where do you start? So for me, this is where I start. I have tons of these. There's some that I've been working on the last few days. I've been playing with texture of the paint, really focusing in on sort of reflection sort of qualities that I see in water. And these pieces I'm working on right now, I'm trying some new ideas with these. I want to, with these pieces, when you think of the process of how a painting, an image that I make, how that's done, I start out with drawings, they're like a gesture, and then from there I build. That's what this is kind of like a little gesture of a landscape. I just sort of, it's not that big a deal. These are marks, playing with washes, and just sort of building this, sort of just laying the groundwork for this little composition. And these images are based on some of my photography. And here's some of the photographs I'm using. So I'm just playing with this simple little point of view. I don't know if you can see this, Kelly. And this is kind of the framework for these studies. So I start with these little gestures, and the next stage with this one, I kind of did one here as an example. I spread out these stages on 3 different images. Actually, I would do this on 1 image, but just to illustrate this process. So I start with these drawings, these gestures, and then I'll put in these, I call them like underpainting tones, which this one has. So it has some of that same structure, but it has these darker tones. And then from here, I start playing again with these different tools. Kelly, can we focus in over here a little? I have these assortment of knives that I'm using, and so I build on this image with these with brushes, more traditional things, with knives, with scrapers, sticks, anything that could make interesting marks. Anyway, this will be the process. But my idea and what I'm trying to do with this, and this is kind of where I'm working right now, is I want to make some work now, a series of pieces that the final finished piece, it will have I'll retain all these stages in the final piece. In other words, when you look at a completed larger piece, that some of these marks, some of this underpainting, some of these kind of this definition, this sort of gestural definition, all that will be part of the final piece. It's not like I paint over everything and hide all the stages that occur in the work. So to me, it's just an idea that I have. I don't know what it's going to look like. This is all kind of new. So the idea is that I think it'll give a kind of vitality to the work. It'll give a reference to how the history of this piece, how it was made. It's kind of like if you build a house. I mean, I know this wouldn't work function, but if you build a house and you left, some of the framing, some of the wires exposed, and you didn't develop it all to this finished level. You just develop part of it. That's my thinking with this, to give it so the viewer will have not only will they see the image, they'll respond to it in terms of the light, the quality of this, the image in terms of this kind of place, but this object, which is a panel with things spread on it, they'll get a sense of its history and how it was made. And I just like that idea. It's an idea that I want to work on right now. So anyway, and these smaller panels will sometimes Kelly, can you go up to this image up here? Sometimes I'll assemble these smaller panels together to make these. I just call these studies, but I think they're really quite beautiful and very interesting. So when I do shows like Rittenhouse, I'll have a whole range of things. I'll have individual studies. I'll have studies like this piece up here that where I combine some of these. That might be 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever. And then I have medium-sized paintings like this painting right here, and also larger paintings like this painting. And I have another size that's even larger than this. It's a larger format painting. It goes up to 7 feet. So I think that's the beauty of viewers going to shows like Rittenhouse, with the exception of going to an artist studio. And when you go to a show like that, unlike here, at that show you get to see a whole range of a person's work, and you get to see a lot of people. It's just a great idea for an art person who loves art to go and look at work, because all the choices, all the beautiful things they can see, but also within a person's, one person's work, you can see all the diversity. Galleries don't usually have that. When I work in a gallery, they'll have maybe just a few larger pieces like this. They won't have all the drawing, all the preliminary stuff, all the diversity of size, price points, and that sort of thing. Plus, you get to meet the artists, so you can pick their brain about things that interests you, or most artists would be glad to share anything that about their work. So I just really encourage everybody. I think this next year is going to be a real transition as we get past COVID, and we move back to things we've been doing. For the public to return, for artists to return, so it's going to be a real critical time. I think art shows like the Rittenhouse style show, I think there's going to be a lot of shows that will probably, like a lot of businesses, we just won't come back. So I think the people of Philadelphia are really fortunate to have a show like that, and so many people involved with it. It's just a great asset for that town. So I'm kind of wind down here a little bit. I would like to say one thing in addition is, today is a very important day for all of us, September 11th. It's a very solemn day of a memory that we all witnessed, and a very tragic day in our history. But I think what happened after that, the kind of unity that we all witnessed, how people came together, how we all sort of, bonded together to get through that. I think that's very important for us, for our culture. And I just hope that can happen. I think we're in a place right now where we need to come together. We need to, that we're stronger in our unity. United we stand, divided we fall, sort of thing. We need that kind of unity that we experienced after 9/11. So anyway, I'm going to cut this short right now and end this. And if anybody has any comments, Kelly will.
Phil, I just want to thank you. I really enjoyed watching your demonstration, seeing your work. I have a real appreciation for the, the sensibility for it. You present it in a way that, well, like I was saying earlier, it just brings back a lot of memories. I mean, I remember seeing things like that, and you have a great way of portraying it.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.